The New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman is the author of the very important best-selling book, Thank You for Being Late, An Optimist's Guide to Thriving in the Age of Accelerations. Tom, thanks very much for coming in.
Great to be here.
So 800,000 federal workers are suffering right now, no paycheck, their families are suffering. What's your big picture take now on the state of the country, the United States, right now in 2019?
Well, you know, Wolf, we talked about a year and a half ago, and I made the point, I quoted my friend Doug Simon. He said, we have a president now who has formal authority, but no moral authority. And the point I made then was, when you have a president with no moral authority, when it comes to a crisis, when he has to look in the camera and say, trust me, believe me, we need X, we need Y, we need to invade here, it's really going to matter. And I think we're at that point. You heard in your correspondence report, no one trusts this man. No one believes a word out of his mouth anymore. He had to deal with Mitch McConnell, to open the government. And I think we're at a point, especially for the next 2 years, where if we do face a crisis, what does it mean to have a crisis when you have a president who has no moral authority? We've never been there.
If there's a real national security threat,
exactly. You can't believe a word out of his mouth.
Yeah, I mean, that's a serious problem. What we're seeing from the president right now, and you've watched him very closely, is this typical Trump?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's typical in this way. Well, we actually have a serious immigration problem. We have an immigration problem because for the 50 years after World War II, well, this is a point I made in my book, it was really easy to be an average country. There were superpowers giving you money, climate change was moderate, populations were under control, and China was not in the World Trade Organization. So everybody could be in the textile business. What's changed over the last decade and a half is it's actually now harder to be a country. They're being hammered by climate change. No superpower wants to touch them because all you win is a bill. Populations are out of control, and China now can compete with anything they sell. So the weakest countries are actually now either fraying or they're actually imploding. And for our hemisphere, they're in Central America. It's Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. That's where this problem is coming from. These countries are falling apart. So if you actually had a comprehensive strategy, what would you do? You'd have a population control strategy, you'd have a climate strategy, and you'd have a security strategy. If the president were actually to come with that strategy, hey, I'd support that. I'd say, yes, we need border security. We also need to address these other issues because, Wolf, these countries, what we're going to witness, a lot more countries are going to fall apart. We've seen it in Africa and the Middle East. They've been flocking to Europe. We've seen it in our hemisphere. This is a serious problem. We do not have a serious man diagnosing and leading us out of
the president's world clearly changed on January 3rd when the Democrats became the majority in the House of Representatives. They won 40 seats in the election. Do you think President Trump fully appreciates the enormity of what he's facing right now from Congress?
No, and you've heard this in all your reporting, Wolf. He's never been here before. I mean, he enjoyed the first 2 years, a very unique thing for a president. He had the White House, he had the Supreme Court, he had the House, and he had the Senate. And now suddenly, he doesn't have the House. And it's a whole new world for him, and he's got to navigate it, and he does not have the skill to do that. And he doesn't have the team to do it. Wolf, he started with the B team. A lot of the B team left. Now he's got the C team. And if we face a crisis with a president who no one believes, who's surrounded by a C team and a dysfunctional White House, God save us.
You've got a lot of members of the cabinet who are acting secretaries as opposed to full secretaries. They're filling jobs because others have left, including some very sensitive positions.
And we have key ambassadorships. I know they've appointed an ambassador to Saudi Arabia, but I don't know that he's on the job yet. I mean, for 2 years we've gone with no ambassador for a pretty important.
Why is that?
I think Trump actually believes, first of all, that he can do everything. He or Jared Kushner, they can handle Saudi Arabia. And I don't think he has a real respect for government. When he gets in trouble, he impugns them as the deep state. He doesn't appreciate that these institutions, well, if they're what make us unique as a country. And he didn't respect them when he was a businessman. He tried to evade them. He certainly doesn't respect them as a leader.
Has he finally met his match in Nancy Pelosi?
I think he certainly met a match in Nancy Pelosi. She's a serious person. But I think the deeper problem, Wolf, is that he's told one too many lies. I don't know whether it was line number 6,000 or 7,000. The Washington Post has been keeping a tab. But what I felt that we're in a moment now where people simply don't believe a word out of his mouth. When he can stand up and say, look, I never said Mexico would pay for the wall. I mean, we're through the looking glass, Wolf. We have a core problem. We have a president without shame who is backed by a party without spine that is supported by a network called Fox News without integrity. and a president without shame, backed by a party without spine, and a network that amplifies it without integrity, and we face a crisis, fasten your seatbelt.
Let me read a couple sentences from a column you recently wrote in the New York Times. Quote, I believe that the only responsible choice for the Republican Party today is an intervention with the president that makes clear that if there is not a radical change in how he conducts himself, and I think that is unlikely, the party's leadership will have no choice but to press for his resignation or join calls for his impeachment. Do you see any sign at all that serious numbers of Republicans are beginning to think along those lines?
I don't, and it's really sad. This is a party that is simply laid down for a demented man. And they've been laying down for anyone who would energize their base, going back to Sarah Palin and then the Tea Party, and now it's Trump. And somehow, as a country, we've managed to stumble forward. But we're really risking our luck here. I mean, how long this can go on, because we have a disturbed man as president, Wolf. I mean, that's very clear. And we have a party that is not ready to stand up to it. And what worries me is now we're threatening our institutions. Look what he did describing the judges in our judicial system as they're Obama judges. And thank God John Roberts stood up and said, no, there aren't Obama judges and Bush judges. They're just judges. You know, look what he's been doing with the military, saying that the people who are out of work now, government workers, well, they're mostly just Democrats. These are our institutions. What makes us unique as a country, Wolf, is that we have a judiciary, we have a nonpartisan military, we have a true state, not some nefarious deep state. And the world envies those institutions. Why do you think all those people are lining up to get into our country? Because they want to be in a place that has those kind of institutions. And that's precisely what this president is attacking. And that is a threat. The biggest crisis we have right now is in the Oval Office. We have a president who does not appreciate the institutions that make our country unique.
Is the Republican leadership, from your perspective, afraid of the president?
Well, these are people who seem to be so obsessed with their $175,000 a year job and free parking at National Airport that they will not stand up and actually speak out, not against for Democrats or some politics, but on behalf of institutions. When the president embarrasses someone like Defense Secretary Mattis the way he did, when he lies day after day, and you as a party say nothing, what do you think is the corrosive impact of that over time?
What do you think of the president's decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria, the way he handled it, and of course, the resignation that resulted in the Defense Secretary James Mattis?
Look, there is a case, Wolf, for actually withdrawing from Syria and withdrawing from Afghanistan. But what would I have done? I would have the art of the deal. I would have come to the Russians and the Syrians and the Iranians and said, well, maybe you want us out, but here's the conditions we need. I wouldn't have just pulled out. I wouldn't have just moved the embassy to Jerusalem and not asked for something in return from Netanyahu or the Palestinians. This is the problem with Trump. He's an ignoramus, okay? He doesn't understand the subtleties of any of these policies, so he keeps giving stuff away. And that's really what's scary to me. With Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, he gave him a complete pass. Well, the choice was not just give him a pass or break relations with Saudi Arabia. You could have made demands on him. He keeps giving stuff away because he doesn't understand things.
Do you see any prospect that it's going to change?
I see no prospect of it whatsoever. I think it's only going to get worse. I think the next few years are going to be one of the most destabilizing and unnerving times in our history, and for you and me, in our journalism careers.
How do you think he's going to respond on February 7th when Michael Cohen, his former lawyer and fixer, goes before the House Oversight Committee and testifies, presumably for hours, and makes very, very serious allegations, potential allegations, that the President of the United States was engaged together with him in crime?
You know, it's so hard to tell, but he's so adept, Wolf, at bald-faced lying that he's capable of saying anything. I can't see him having some moral crisis over it. He'll just tell another lie.
When the world, and you travel all over the world, you're a foreign affairs columnist, when the world is watching what's going on in the United States right now, friends of the United States, allies of the United States in Europe and elsewhere, what are they thinking?
what they're thinking is, Wolf, that, you know, America is the world. We're the tent pole that holds up the world. We're the people who invest in things even when we don't get an immediate payoff in order to promote global stability that ultimately is to our great benefit. They have never, most of them have never seen an America like this, with a president who doesn't appreciate allies, a president who does not manifest the very values that America, that it makes America so attractive for them, and a president who simply his word is not even remotely his bond. And so they're all basically, they're all adrift. It's not like China's going to lead the world. It's not like Russia's going to lead the world. What happens when we don't lead, Wolf, is that nobody leads.
Do you have any confidence in any of the president's top staff, his senior advisors, members of the cabinet, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, for example?
No, none whatsoever. I think Pompeo is in a race with Tillerson for who is the all-time worst Secretary of State, and Pompeo seems to be nosing him out.
You think that Pompeo is a worse Secretary of State than Rex Tillerson?
I just read his speech from the Middle East. If you think
the one he delivered in Cairo.
The one he delivered in Cairo. You know, if you think your job as Secretary of State is to go to the Arab world, piss on the previous president while you're there, and proclaim that you figured it all out because you figured out that the really right U.S. policy is to support every Arab tyrant who has in jail thousands of not Islamic radicals, but young, democracy-advocating people, particularly in a country like Egypt, all right? If you think that's like the most brilliant policy and that we're not going to pay for that down the road, then you're a complete idiot.
Yeah, I was sort of surprised that he went after President Obama. I could see him doing it here in the United States. But politics were supposed to stop at one point at the water's edge.
And to praise Sisi, and we figured it out. We figured out that Iran is the bad guy and that these Arab tyrants are the good guys. So we're just going to support them all along. And all these Arab youth who have always looked to America, you know, to be the voice and beacon of democracy and freedom. What do you think they're thinking? And how do you think that's going to work out for all of them in jail when they get out of jail?
With his base, though, you know, those who really love the President Trump, he's still very, very popular with that hardcore Republican conservative base.
Well, you know, I can't explain all of that. I've always felt, Wolf, that his base actually hates the people who hate Trump more than they care about Trump or his specific policies. I think there's a lot of resentment out there at elites and different people. And also, in fairness to that base, I think there's a lot of people who are living in this moment of acceleration, against what my book is about, and they find this moment very disorienting. And so a president comes along and says, I can stop the winds of change. The wall is a metaphor for a lot of things, not just the border and immigration. It's I can stop the winds of change. I can see how that appeals to some people. They're very disoriented. The fact is, though, he's selling them snake oil.
So where is this all heading? Because within the next few weeks, or maybe in a couple of months or so, Robert Mueller is going to come out with his report. You hear the president say almost on a daily basis, no collusion, no collusion, no collusion. Where is this heading?
I think it's heading for a constitutional crisis, Wolf. A constitutional crisis in which people like John Roberts, the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, and people like ex-President Obama and ex-President Bush working together as one team. The three of them, I think, are going to have to play a very important role to speak up in a nonpartisan way, to present a nonpartisan front, I think, to defend and protect the Constitution.
So you say a constitutional crisis. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I think that we're going to probably, as a result of Mueller, have charges against the president that are certainly going to stimulate some people to want to bring about an impeachment. God knows what kind of things Mueller. I've been watching your show this afternoon. The kind of collusion that might be involved, the kind of simply illegality that Trump may have been involved in. Who knows what happens when we get his tax returns? This is going to be a gigantic mess, Wolf, and it's going to affect the authority of the president. And I think that in this moment, we're going to so badly need nonpartisan people who stand up for American institutions and values. And that's why I'm glad Obama stayed out of it. I'm glad President George W. Bush has stayed out of it. I have such respect for John Roberts, so he spoke up to defend the nonpartisanship of the courts. I think these people who have been acting in this, trying to act in a nonpartisan way, they're going to become so important, Wolf, as we enter this crisis. Because
so you think we will actually hear from them?
And I think we will hear from them because we are going to so badly need people who are ready to stand up for what makes us unique as a country, the values, okay, and the institutions, because that's what's going to be required. Because I think they are going to be threatened. This is a man who will burn down anything and everything to save himself. We've already seen that.
Tom Friedman is the New York Times columnist, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, the author of the important book. Thank you for being late. You weren't late here today. Thanks for showing up on time. And you wore a tie. You look good. Tom Friedman, thanks.